My mother died 3 months ago. For weeks, I couldn't bring myself to enter her house. Everything inside still smelled like her perfume. Her favorite coffee mug was still sitting on the kitchen counter. Her reading glasses were exactly where she had left them. It felt wrong to touch anything, but eventually I had no choice. The house had to be cleaned before it could be sold. I spent the first few hours packing old clothes and family photos. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Old birthday cards, photo albums, boxes full of things nobody had looked at for years. Then I noticed something strange. One of the wooden floorboards in her bedroom looked newer than the others. At first I ignored it. I thought maybe it had been repaired years ago. But the more I looked at it, the more it bothered me. I grabbed a screwdriver from the garage and carefully lifted the board. Underneath, it was a small metal box. It was covered in dust. There was no lock. Inside was a dark brown leather diary. Nothing else. No jewelry, no money, just the diary. I smiled. I thought I had found my mother's old journal. Maybe it was full of memories from when she was young. Maybe stories about my father. Maybe things she never had the chance to tell me. I carried it into the living room and made myself a cup of coffee. I remember smiling as I opened the first page. That smile disappeared almost instantly. At the top of the page was my full name, Daniel Carter. Below it was a sentence written in my mother's handwriting. If you are reading this, they finally found me. I stared at those words for almost a minute. They finally found me. Who was she talking about? I turned the page. The first entry wasn't dated. It simply began with one sentence. Everything you know about your father is a lie. I felt my heart start beating faster. My father had died when I was 9 years old. At least that's what I had believed my entire life. My mother never liked talking about him. Whenever I asked questions, she would quietly change the subject. As I got older, I stopped asking. I looked back at the first page again. If you are reading this, they finally found me. For some reason, I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone in the house. I looked toward the hallway. Nothing. I checked the front door. Still locked. I laughed at myself. It was just an old diary, nothing more. I took another sip of coffee and continued reading. The next sentence made me freeze. Your father did not die. I lied to protect you. I read those words again, then again. My hands had started shaking. For 22 years I had believed my father was dead. Now my mother's own handwriting was telling me that everything I knew was false, and that was only the second page. I closed the diary. I honestly considered throwing it into the fireplace. Part of me believed my mother had simply written it during a difficult time in her life. Maybe she wasn't thinking clearly. Maybe grief had changed her, but another part of me knew something wasn't right. My mother never lied, not once in my entire life. If she had written those words, she had a reason. I opened the diary again. The next page began with a date. October 14, 1998. Today, Daniel asked me where his father is. I told him he was in heaven. He cried for almost an hour. I have never hated myself more. I had to stop reading. I remembered that day. I remembered sitting on the living room floor holding one of my father's old jackets. I remembered asking where he had gone. I remembered my mother hugging me while she cried. That memory had been real, or at least I thought it was. I turned another page. One day you will hate me for lying. I accept that, but I would rather lose my son than lose his life. My chest tightened. Lose my life? What did she mean? The next few pages described things I couldn't understand. She wrote about moving to another city, changing our last name, burning old family photographs, destroying documents. She even mentioned throwing away every picture that showed my father. Suddenly, memories I had forgotten started coming back. I remembered changing schools when I was little. I remembered my mother refusing to let me use social media when everyone else did. I remembered how nervous she became whenever someone knocked on our door unexpectedly. Back then, I thought she was just overprotective. Now I wasn't so sure. Then I reached another sentence. Never trust anyone who says they knew your father. If someone recognizes his face, leave immediately. Do not ask questions. Just leave. I felt cold. I had never met anyone who claimed to know my father. Not until 2 weeks before my mother's funeral, a man in his 60s had approached me outside the cemetery. He looked at me for several seconds before speaking. You have your father's eyes. At the time, I assumed he had simply been an old family friend. Before I could ask his name, he walked away. I never saw him again. I suddenly realized something. He wasn't talking about a dead man. He believed my father was alive. I turned the page as fast as I could. There was a folded envelope taped inside the diary. My name was written across the front. Inside was a single photograph. It showed my mother, my father, and me. I couldn't have been older than 5. At first it looked completely normal. Then I noticed the date. The picture had been taken 3 years after my father was supposed to have died. I stopped breathing. There was only one thought running through my mind. If my father wasn't dead, then who had we buried? I looked at the photograph for what felt like an hour. I turned it over, hoping the date was a mistake. It wasn't. The ink had faded over the years, but it was still readable. August 17, 2004. According to everything my mother had ever told me, my father had died in 2001. So how could he be standing next to us 3 years later? I searched through every box in the house looking for another copy of that picture. There wasn't one. It was as if my mother had hidden every piece of evidence except this one. I picked up the diary again. The next page began with a sentence that made my stomach turn. If you found the photograph, then you finally know I lied about the funeral. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the diary. There was no funeral. There was only a closed coffin. Nobody was allowed to open it. Nobody questioned it. Everyone believed your father was inside. He wasn't. I remembered the funeral. I remembered the rain, the black umbrellas, people crying. I even remembered touching the wooden coffin. I never actually saw my father's face, not once. The diary continued. Your father begged me to let the world believe he was dead. He said it was the only way to protect us. I hated him for asking, but I loved him too much to refuse. I felt completely numb. Everything I believed about my childhood was falling apart one page at a time. Then I noticed something folded between the next 2 pages. It was an old newspaper clipping. The headline immediately caught my attention. Local businessman found murdered in his home. There was a small photograph of the victim. I didn't recognize him, but someone had circled his face with a red pen. Below the article, my mother had written just 5 words. Your father didn't kill him. I kept reading. The police believed they had the right man. They were wrong. Your father was there that night, but he wasn't the killer. He saw something he was never supposed to see. From that moment on, they wanted him dead. I leaned back in my chair. My breathing had become slow, heavy. Who were they? Every page mentioned them, but never explained who they were. Then I reached another sentence. If anyone ever tells you your father was a murderer, don't argue with them. Just walk away. The truth is far more dangerous than the lie. I closed my eyes for a moment. Nothing made sense anymore. Then my phone vibrated, an unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but after everything I had just read, I answered. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then an older man's voice quietly said, "Daniel, you finally found the diary." My heart stopped. I had never told anyone about it. I couldn't speak. My hand was gripping the phone so tightly it started to hurt. "Who is this?" The man didn't answer my question. Instead, he sighed. "I was hoping your mother would destroy that diary before she died. She didn't." There was silence. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "How do you know about the diary?" "Because I was there the night she wrote it." My entire body went cold. "Who are you?" Another long pause. Then he quietly answered, "Him, your father." I laughed, not because it was funny, because my mind refused to believe what I had just heard. "No, my father is dead. That's what your mother wanted you to believe. Why would she lie to me for 20 years to keep you alive?" Those exact words were written in the diary. I had just read them. How could this man know that unless— No, it couldn't be. I asked him something only my father should know. What was the name of my first dog? Without hesitating, he answered, "Max. You cried for 2 days when he ran away." My knees felt weak. Very few people knew that. Then he said something else. "Your mother blamed herself for what happened. She thought lying was the only way to save you. I never wanted her to carry that burden alone, but we had no choice." I sat down on the floor. Everything around me felt unreal. "If you're really my father, where have you been? Hiding from who?" "The people who killed an innocent man and tried to make me take the blame. The same people your mother kept calling they." "Exactly." For the first time during the call, I believed him, not completely, but enough to keep listening. He continued, "I don't have much time. If you found the diary, then someone else will be looking for it too." "What do you mean? Your mother wasn't the only person who knew where it was hidden. Someone has been watching that house since the day she died." I immediately looked toward the living room window. The curtains were open. Outside, a dark sedan was parked across the street. The engine was running. I couldn't see inside. "How do you know that?" "Because Thea watching you right now." My heart started racing. I slowly stepped away from the window. "Don't panic. Just listen carefully. You need to leave the house immediately. Take the diary with you. Don't stop anywhere. Don't go to your apartment. Don't go to the police." "Then where do I go?" Before he could answer, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. Exactly 3. The man on the phone stopped talking. Then he whispered, "Thayer early. Daniel, whatever happens, do not open that door." The knocking came again. 3 slow knocks, not louder, not faster, almost patient, as if the person outside already knew I wasn't going anywhere. My father whispered into the phone, "Don't make a sound." I stood completely still. I could hear my own heartbeat. Then a voice came from the other side of the door. "Daniel, we know you're inside." The voice sounded familiar. I couldn't remember where I had heard it before. Then it hit me. The man from my mother's funeral, the one who told me I had my father's eyes. I stepped away from the door. The floor creaked beneath my feet. Silence. Then the man outside laughed. I heard that. "You're still here." My father spoke again. "Go out the back door. Now." I grabbed the diary and ran toward the kitchen. The back door opened into a small yard behind the house. As I unlocked it, I heard the front door handle slowly turning. Someone had a key. I didn't look back. I ran. I kept running until I reached the next street. Only then did I stop to catch my breath. My father was still on the phone. "Good, keep moving. Don't stop until you reach the train station." "Why the train station?" "Because there's a locker there, number 317. Inside, you'll find everything your mother couldn't write." "How do you know?" "Because I put it there." The call suddenly became quiet. I could barely hear him. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Thayer, tracing this call. I don't have much time. Listen carefully. The man looking for you is not working alone. How many are there? More than you want to know." The line went silent. Dad, nothing." The call ended. I immediately tried calling the number back. It didn't exist. I reached the train station 20 minutes later. My hands were shaking as I searched for locker 317. There it was, exactly where he said it would be. The locker required a 4-digit code. For a moment I froze. Then I remembered my birthday. It didn't work. My mother's birthday. Nothing. Then I looked at the diary. The very first page, October 14th. I entered 1014. The lock clicked. Inside was a small backpack, an old passport, several $1,000s in cash, a handgun, and a sealed envelope. Across the front, my father had written only 6 words. "Open this only if I disappear." I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was another letter. "Daniel, if you're reading this, then I probably failed. Everything your mother wrote is true, but she never knew the whole story. The man who murdered that businessman wasn't a stranger. He was your uncle." My hands stopped moving. I had never had an uncle. At least that's what I believed. The letter continued. "He disappeared the same night. The police never found him because he was never running from them. He was running from the people he worked for. And if they've started looking for you again, it means they finally know where the diary was hidden." I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy. I turned around. The same man from the funeral was standing less than 20 feet away. He smiled. Then he quietly said, "You should have burned the diary. The story didn't end with your mother. It starts with you."